Sometimes those common self-help tips can be destructive, and that's what we're going to talk about today. For example, even the one that I use, growing 1% at a time, we're going to discuss this one as well. So it's really all about the circumstance, the individual, and investigating what's right for us. So in my podcast, I have some basic assumptions about you and I, and these are some of my assumptions. So as a life coach, I believe that we are not broken, that, we've experienced circumstances and we have challenges, whether it's like trauma challenges or this challenges, but many times our minds and bodies are reacting in a way that they're kind of supposed to react. And so I don't really think we're broken. I feel like life is happening to us and everything we've gone through can be used to actually help us and others. And so that's really helpful. Also, I also believe that we are the best experts on ourselves and you're the best expert on yourself. Another presumption or assumption that I have is that life is a journey and it has challenges and joys. And it's not about being happy all the time. In fact, that's not even healthy. It's about growing. And growing can be uncomfortable and very rewarding. I think that the joys of growing is that it does create peace within ourselves as we reconcile all of the parts of us and also heal the different parts of us. And it also brings joy, resilience, wisdom, and appreciate our uniqueness and our space in the world that Source and God created for us. And so those are kind of some presumptions that I have with this podcast. And self-help always has presumptions as well. And so the messages we get are not always helpful. So it's good to kind of delve into them a little bit more and dissect them and see what we get out of them. So see how each of these fit for you, and let's chat. So the first one is focus on what you can control, which is your attitude. And the thought is that attitude is, we've got circumstances, which is 90% of our life, and our attitude, which is 10%. And that is the only part we can control. Well, as an overly kind girl, I use this idea of just focusing on my attitude to negate my ownership and my ownership of choices. And that is not helpful because honestly, sometimes it's your attitude and sometimes you need to change your circumstances and look at that. And so it's not just about attitude. And I do agree, obviously our attitude is really important, but we also have a lot of choices and a lot of control, and sometimes we have to change circumstances. So focus on what you can control, your attitude, and also look at the different circumstances in your life. Number 2. Meaning in life comes from serving others. Yes, and there's more to it because I believe that we are created to be communal and that we are created in service. But as an overly kind person, I was serving at the expense of myself all the time, and that is not how we were created. So we need to prioritize ourselves, and honestly, our first responsibility is to take care of our body, mind, and soul and take care of this. I do think it's so important to serve, but to do it consciously and not to do it at the expense of ourselves all the time, unconsciously. So that's really important, is that meaning in life is from serving others, and it's super important to take care of ourselves. Number 3, listen to yourself. And yes, I think intuition and listening to ourselves is super important. And we also need to talk to ourselves. Because if we just listen, we have to remember that we have a lawyer and a lifeguard part of our brain. The lifeguard part of our brain is all about keeping us safe in the little baby swim pool with a life jacket on and no water. It just doesn't even care. It's all about taking care of us. And so it's going to be giving us messages all the time to keep us small, to keep us not wanting to expand, because that's its job. And so if we just listen to that, then we're not going to grow, we're not going to get to where we want, and we're going to stay small, and we're going to not like it. And so it's really important that we also talk to ourselves, and that's an ideal scenario. Also, it's important that when we listen to ourselves, we have different parts of ourselves. Like I have the 2-year-old part, and it just wants its own way. And you know what? I have to listen to that part sometime and see, like, okay, what are you trying to tell me? And then there I have the other part, the 17-year-old part that just thinks, so there's different parts to all of us, and understanding who we're listening to is helpful, and be like, oh, that's the part of me that thinks it's in a scary situation because the relationship seems volatile and it's going into fight or flight. So, there's just different parts of us to understand, and it's really important to know what part we're listening to. And then we can just make choices based off that and giving compassion to our parts and making room for all of that. For example, I never made room for the part of, I would call it like the strong bitch or something like that, which most of us would be like, oh no, we should not have a part like that in us. And I actually think we should have a part like that in us. For example, when I was in 7th grade, I had moved to California, and I was practicing gymnastics because I was moved there with my coach, super excited, was going to train really hard to get into the Olympics. That was my goal. And I stayed with the family, and in the family, the girl my age was very jealous and not very kind to me. She ended up digging her heel into my foot and breaking my foot. And I literally had not gotten in touch with like any like bitchy type part of me, and I like did not even have the ability to push her away and say stop that, because I had been so trained that that is not a good side of us. And honestly, we need that side of us, and to understand that that has an important role, because we should never allow abuse or anything like that. So it's important to have different parts of us, like the shadow selves and the strong bitchy side, and those are all important pieces of us. And we make decisions with our conscious mind, so understanding each of our parts is super important. That's also something I use with life coaching and hypnotherapy, is understanding that sometimes we have parts of us that are not serving what we're trying to achieve. And so getting that part in harmony with our goal when it's reacting, off of an old belief or an old system is what I do in hypnotherapy. That's the whole part of it, is getting us more aligned to where we want to go by getting all of our parts on the same path rather than a tug of war. So that's the third one, is listening to yourself. So listen to yourself and understand we need to talk to ourselves. We have different parts that we may be listening to and all of that. Have you gone through a breakup that's kind of left you rattled and maybe questioning yourself some? Do you find that you're a pretty kind person that's chronically overgiving, overfunctioning, and maybe you're just plain tired and maybe a little resentful? Do you feel like you're going through the motions of life, but you're not really living your life? Well, that's what the Unravel Notebook is for. It's 61 days for you to create your life by intent and unravel your thoughts and beliefs, so you can connect with God, yourself, and others in a better, more intentional way and live brighter. Fourth one, be flexible. Yes, be flexible, but not too flexible. And that just depends on the circumstance, the situation, where you're at. But flexibility in itself all the time, not helpful, especially if you're generally a very flexible person, which I am. So the fifth one, just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. That is correct. We have thoughts. We have all sorts of weird thoughts. But I used to do something called thought swapping. So when I was in a destructive situation and I'd have the situation, then I would have thoughts about the situation, and that would create stress, anxiety, sadness, and all that. So rather than investigating that thought, like, why am I having that thought? What's going on here? I just swapped out the thought, and I swapped it out for, like, I'm going to focus on the positive things of this circumstance or this situation, and swapped it out so I could have a better feeling. So avoiding the uncomfortable feeling or possible ramifications from investigating my thoughts. So sometimes our thoughts are true, and we just need to investigate all the time, like with compassion and curiosity. Like, why am I having that thought? What does that mean to me? And not just swap them out so we can have better feelings. So yeah, just because we have a thought doesn't mean it's true, and it might be true. So it's worth investigating it for ourselves. And the sixth one, what I alluded to at the very beginning, when I always talk about grow 1% a day. And that's because I truly believe, rather than growth being this, like, I'm going to do this huge thing, I don't think we're designed for that, because I think that's like way too much for our bodies and our nervous systems. So just growing incrementally can make drastic changes over a year or something like that, a whole different person. So I do agree, like small changes over time is where we want to be. And we have to understand that growth is not linear all the time. It's not like, yeah, I'm growing 1% today and I grow 4% the next day and it was 6% and 1%. Because there's times when we're not growing and we're actually going down. And if we're like judging ourselves like, oh my goodness, I'm like backtracking and I'm struggling with that, it doesn't really serve us, because we do know that really growth is a matter of up and then down a little bit and then up even higher and down, and then just making room for the human experience, which is ups and down, but the trajectory is that we're growth minded and that we're growing a little bit at a time. So you can see that growing 1% a day can be really helpful, but we don't want to use that against ourselves when we backtrack a little bit, which is part of the human experience. So those are the 6 common self-help tips that can be destructive. Focus on what you can control, your attitude, and we talked about that one. Meaning in life comes from serving others, listening to yourself, be flexible. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true, and grow 1% a day. So see what resonates for you. But now we're going to just do a little visualization and a little relaxation to end this. So I want you to just take a deep breath in, and I always say belly breath because you want your belly to expand, and then breathe out slowly. And take one more deep breath in. And breathe out slowly. And I just want you to kind of repeat these words in your mind as I go over them. So thank you for this journey that we're on, and thank you, God or Source, for the journey. I trust in your guidance and love. Thank you, my body, my mind, and my spirit, that is going to tell me what is right for me and what I need to hear. I acknowledge that I'm the best expert on myself, and I'm trusting in myself more and more day by day. I'm taking responsibility for me, my awareness, and my thoughts, and I'm taking responsibility for my journey and my choices and what I can control. When awareness is brought to me in an area of healing, then I am willing to be courageous and go through the processes to heal and process different circumstances and experiences I have had, because I know in the end that will create more peace, joy, resilience, and wisdom. I'm growing 1% a day, and I'm thankful for this journey. That's it. Make it a great day. I believe in you.
Stay tuned for our next episode.